Thank you, Julie, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Those of you who've spent any length of time with me in the past several months will be relieved to know that the topic of my last lecture is not the transformative power of Zumba. Instead, I decided to go a little bit more substantive. And I'd like to share with you today a story about the very powerful meaning in memento. I'm the only one here that was with you 40 years ago today. Happy birthday. I love you. Your mom. A few years ago, I found myself reading birthday cards aloud and opening gifts at a 40th birthday surprise party my family threw for me. Like many of my life's special occasions, turning 40 was both a personal milestone and a collective one, with my big family noting the passage of time that it represented for all of us. As my mom, then 85, rightly noted, she was the only one at my party who could say she was with me from the start. Fast forward 40 years, and we were side by side again, sunken down comfortably into my sofa. As I read my mom's message, I instinctively took her hand and raised it up in mine as if we had reached some sort of summit together. The wish for me and the nod to our shared history wasn't all my mom had written in my card. There was this postscript: the dress from an important day in your life. With a knowing smile, my mom placed a gift bag in my lap. She does this sometimes, wraps up pieces of her children's past as gifts, sometimes gag gifts. Other times, she simply hands them back, solitary or bundled in all their miscellany for take home. There have been storied sewing patterns, school art projects, random scout badges, letters written home, newspaper clippings, and report cards. I reached into the bag and pulled out a box. As curious family and friends looked on, I removed the lid and turned back the tissue as if to open a book. Safe to say, neither my mom nor anyone assembled in my living room that day was prepared for my reaction, an unbridled burst into peals of laughter so overwhelming, tears streamed down my face. The gift was a childhood relic I hadn't encountered in years, a memento that took me back to April 1976 and my first communion. But before I get ahead of myself, here's what was happening in the world from my vantage point as a 7-year-old on North 12th Street in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. My older brothers and sisters ranged in age from 13 to 29. Many had moved out of the house into their own grown-up lives. I was even an aunt already. My older than typical parents, 8 sisters, and 3 brothers were pretty much my everything. My personality and worldview shaped through unique connections to each of them. Being the youngest of 12 was a powerful identifier for me. I used to show off by reciting the names of all of my brothers and sisters as fast as I could. I'll demonstrate later. And always punctuating the list with "and me." There was certain good fortune to my place in the Mullins birth order, but my spot at the tail end of the tail end did have its complications. Remember that primary school exercise we all did, draw your family? When I wasn't drawing people stacked on top of each other, I was offering lineup-style depictions requiring multiple pages. For example, that's just page 1. And not quite squeezing on to page 2, there's me. Yeah, alone. Alone on page 3. My son, now the age I was when I produced this family portrait, had one word for it: whoa. In the 1976 of my memory, President Gerald Ford presided over the nation's much-hyped bicentennial. The cardstock photo frames that our school portraits came in were requisitely patriotic, with 1776 to 1976 printed at the bottom. The US Treasury reintroduced the $2 bill. I still have a few that a great aunt gave to me. Even my dad was moved by the spirit of '76. This according to the newsletter of Holy Family Hospital, where he was the resident decorator. No doubt borrowing from a page of his Scoutmaster's handbook, Jim Mullins painted the familiar US Eagle symbol on his trusty paint cart that year. By the 1970s, the cadence of my mom's life had undergone a seismic shift. Along with re-entering the workforce as a hospital psychiatric technician, my mom enrolled at a local college. You might say that in their middle age, my parents were revealed to me as lifelong learners. My mom had greater flexibility to read more, to take in and compile knowledge and ideas. In 1976, she clipped this article from Family Circle magazine. Secrets from a speech consultant, how to be a super speaker. The piece featured speech dynamics teacher Dorothy Sarnoff, former Broadway star of The King and I. Like her, my mom was a singer, an enthusiastic soprano who would have loved to have been on stage herself. My mom took note of the super speaker tips and then determined the article decidedly timeless. She saved that gem for future reference, passing it on to me 20 years later when I was in law school. In turn, I hung on to it, confident I'd be glad to come across it again one day, because you never know when you're going to need a public speaking refresher. Like a lot of kids in the 70s, I had an insatiable and, let's say, undiscriminating appetite for TV, tuning into shows like Kojak, The Bionic Woman, The Waltons, and the especially relatable Little House on the Prairie. Echoes of the evening news also pepper my memories. In 1976, Walter Cronkite reported incessantly on the armed robbery trial of Patty Hearst. There was also news of paleoanthropologist Richard Leakey's game-changing discoveries on the evolution of the species. In addition, I had become a fan of the TV miniseries. I was so impressed by the story of Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt that I recounted their early years in a self-styled synopsis, complete with indignant commentary on FDR's philandering. Predictably definitive and exhaustive was my little book's dedication to Mom and Dad. Sue, Pat, Mary Kay, Jane, Mike, Nan, Jim, Amy, Carl, Monica, Malcolm, that was my sister's dog, couldn't leave him out, and Eleanor and Franklin. My wonderfully encouraging second grade teacher, Mrs. Schleiss, either overestimated my potential as the next great historical biographer or affirmed that some things are just worth saving for posterity. She ran my little story through our school's new laminating machine, preserving it forever. That is, for as long as my mom or I would hang on to it. That spring of 1976, the AM radio soundtrack to outings in my family's green Volkswagen bus featured the Carpenters, ABBA, and Donna Summer. But getting more play at home was Wanted, the Outlaws. The album had become my dad's unlikely favorite in 1976, which I would come to recall as the year Dad embraced his inner honky-tonk rebel. Possibly inspired by his adolescent children, our dad too enrolled in guitar lessons and began to amass a small record collection. Often with an after-supper, pint-sized audience of one, he strummed along to Waylon and Willie and toward the trademark mastery he delivered in most pursuits. Also in April of 1976, like generations of kids before us, and 11 predecessors in my immediate family alone, the second graders of Holy Innocents Catholic Parish were poised to make our first communion. I don't remember much about how my first Holy Eucharist day started out, but evidently, I was game to pose for a photo against the family VW bus, naturally. Worth noting is my departure from traditional First Communion attire. The color of the dress doesn't show up very well in this snapshot, but I can help you get the idea. Instead of the usual all-white, to-the-knee wedding ensemble, it was going to be floor-length blue gingham. My mom said yes to the dress. From Montgomery Ward's. She thought it suited me to a T. In place of a veil, she made me a matching white and baby blue headband, putting the finishing touches on it the night before my first communion while on her break at work. Described in our preparatory workbook as one of the most important days in a Catholic's life, First Holy Eucharist promised to be memorable. Mine certainly didn't disappoint. What made it extraordinary could have been brought on by a case of sacramental jitters, or maybe it was just the unfortunately timed result of something I ate. In any case, as Mass progressed toward its culmination, the initiation of Holy Innocents' 1976 cohort of First Communicants, the girl in the blue gingham dress started throwing up. It's okay, you can laugh. Thank you. What ensued is something of a blur in my memory. I suppose as discreetly as possible, my family sprang into action. So did Mr. Reitmeyer, my classmate's dad, from a neighboring pew. When recalling that day, my mom has reserved special mention for the well-meaning Mr. Reitmeyer, who had offered his pressed white handkerchief against a deluge of vomit. Also featured in the narrative of Sarah's First Communion debacle, although not as favorably, has been Elmer Clayman. He was my mom's coworker on 2 East, the psychiatric ward at the hospital. Not that anyone asked Elmer, but on what happened at church, he had a theory. Textbook neuroses. The mother must have sent the child over the edge with her working parents' last-minute sewing project, my matching headband. True, Elmer, I was a little high-strung as a youngster, but probably not over the matching headband. Ultimately, I made my first communion. I still have my certificate to show for it. 33 years later, the dress I'd worn, stains only faintly detectable, made an encore appearance on my 40th birthday. That's because my mom saves things. A lot of things. Most things. Like many who came of age during the Great Depression, and like working class people of any era, my parents had little choice but to use things past their prime, to recycle and repurpose. The waste not, want not approach was especially critical to the survival of a big family. But along with everyday items that would have some future function, my mom hung on to things that might hold sentimental value. Saving was her default, probably because deciding what to keep and what not to keep requires a certain amount of time and mental energy. That, and sometimes it just doesn't seem right to get rid of it. Whatever the reason, the backstory, the rationale, or the absence thereof, it's entirely possible that my mom still has Mr. Reitmeyer's laundered hanky somewhere among her things. I've taken after my mom in this way, and while the tendency is both blessing and curse, I believe there can be deep meaning in the anti-letting go, value, even virtue in the holding on. I admit I discard less readily than most. Those of you who know me know that. It's a trait that subjects me to frequent anticipated ribbing, sometimes expressions of incredulity or concern about me. You people with your unexpired yogurt and gigabytes of available Zimbra email memory, go ahead and mock me for my small collection of gently used aluminum foil and half-read newspapers. But when you decide to take up mosaic crafting and don't have a few broken dishes stashed away for that eventuality, Don't come crying to me. Oh, and I have news for you about the yogurt. It's already been contaminated by bacteria anyway. That's what makes it yogurt. Third floor, Bemis. I know that over-saving or hoarding in its extreme can be a problem. I accept that the current decluttering, super-organizing ethos has its merits. Occasionally, I cull, I toss or pass things along. That process, and for me it is a process, feels good, freeing, tidy, and productive on many levels, just like my Real Simple magazine says it will. I try to save some things electronically so they take up less physical space. But to the professional organizer featured last year in the New York Times, who directs parents to photograph samples of their children's artwork and pitch those piles of overrated originals, I say, really? I can't do it, and I don't want to be the kind of person who can. I know I'm not alone in saving mementos, those things that evoke memory, feeling, and context. Who doesn't keep some artifacts that anchor and preserve, taking us back through the stories of our lives and illuminating the connections we've made? Each of us can attest to the power of memento to reveal who we are and where we've come from. I'm suggesting that there's memento in more than you might think. It's why I began most days sipping coffee from a mug my husband gave to me almost 20 years ago, shortly after we met and when our future was an unknown. It's why a quilt incorporating remnants of my kindergarten paint smock fabric struck me as one of the best baby gifts ever. It's why I'll always save this and every other note from my son. In a moment of 7-year-old anger, he communicated via Post-it from behind his bedroom door with endearing clarity, "Get out of here, Mom." Poor Aled. One day he'll know I share that and he won't be happy. The attic of my old house could conceivably cave under the weight of the letters I've tucked away up there. My husband and I nurtured a transatlantic, pre-internet romance through the written word, and I saved every hard-won piece of that. My mom, sisters, less prolific brothers, and other cherished family and friends have also written countless letters to me over the years, and I've hung on to most of those too. Notes, cards, airmail stationery, containing the minutia of daily life, celebrating something special, or offering needed encouragement. My dad, on the other hand, didn't put pen to paper often. The cards he signed in his own hand are treasures of a particular kind. I'm grateful to have kept a rare letter from him received around my 22nd birthday, a few weeks into a volunteer experience in South America. I was homesick, and my family knew it. My dad closed with this: "Hope things are going well, and that you are happy. Hang in there. Time goes so fast." He spoke from experience, unknowingly closing in on his last couple of years. And of course, about time, he was right. Holding on to things is about more than accumulating stuff. It's even about more than our sentimental journeys. Keeping things allows us to look back and see the experiences that support our sense of connection, links that we might help others to see, our partners, our children, our friends, the loved ones of our future yet to be. I'm talking about uncovering purpose and meaning in everyday things in a way that elevates them to the status of memento. When I look at an itinerary from a trip to a new place and the rocks or shells I gathered there, my son's favorite jigsaw with the missing piece, a generations-old mixing bowl, or the front page of a newspaper that freezes in time the days when my children entered the world, I experience the web of relationships that make up my life. They are treasured illustrations of the truth that I am part of something bigger. We might collect those objects because they are infinitely interesting in their texture, variety, complexity, and potential. Such artifacts don't have to confine us to the past. They can keep our minds and hearts open to the expanse of our humanity, to all of the experiences woven into the selves we are. Years from now, when you students are my age, much of our stuff will be digitized and stored in some sort of cloud. We'll likely be an even more disposable society than we are today, with little of what we use built to last. May I suggest this? Hang on to that favorite book, that actual book, a handed back A paper with your professor's inspiring comments, the ticket stub or boarding pass from the time that you first ventured abroad. Even if you don't compile bulging archives of tangibles like some of us do, find some way to preserve the memories they represent. There are risks in the anti-letting go. Holding on gets cumbersome, and it isn't always in our best interests. But consider the payoff overall. Whatever form our evidence takes, we are reminded that incredible, amazing things happen in our lives. The mysterious phenomenon of falling and staying in love, the humbling joys and frustrations of parenting or caregiving in any form, the unparalleled education that is travel. We also are afforded perspective on the trying times, the career path that took a detour, the unexplainable loss of a friendship, the too soon passing of a loved one. For some, realities tougher than those. We remember when we look back that we are affected, changed, and that we have the capacity to affect others. We excel and we fail. Most of what we do falls somewhere in between. We try to do the right thing, but we also make mistakes. We learn and grow, celebrate and cherish. We gauge when it's time to move on, and sometimes, remarkably, we do so. We persist. We bring things full circle. So, getting back to 1976 and that important day in my life. What message, imperative, lesson, challenge, or inspiration can be gleaned from my first communion dress, an emblem of mixed feelings, if ever there was one? Yeah. What message? For the faithful, my first Eucharistic misfit narrative might be testament to an all-embracing, come as you are, Christ. He'd have to be, right? What imperative? Try this on. Finish what you start. You're there wherever there is, and you've come this far. You should probably hang in there. Or not. There will be occasions when leave-taking might be in order, and you'll summon whatever it takes to make that call. What lesson? I have one. Whatever the seemingly epic crisis that disrupts your best-laid plans, it might not be that bad. You can handle it. Not only that, but whatever life hands you in the form of a true hardship, tragedy, or injustice, you can come out the other side of that too. Stories abound of others who have. What challenge? Consider this. Be that person, that earnest, kind-hearted soul, that Mr. Reitmeyer, who lifts up and responds to those in need, even if it is with a woefully inadequate handkerchief. At your best moments, you'll resist tearing down even a little bit because you can. Instead, you'll choose understanding because you know everyone has a story. You'll offer empathy because you'll remember that, as the saying goes, every person you meet is fighting some kind of battle. Finally, what inspiration? How about this? In a sea of white sameness and long pigtails, you can be the blue gingham dress and pixie haircut. One day, when you're 40 or 85, you'll be gifted with a reminder of just how that went for you, and you just might laugh till you cry. Thank you.